Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We're a bunch of mega fans giving you the news discussion and, of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brandon's work and the Cosmere. I'm Eric, and joining me is Ian.
Hey, I'm WeiryWriter.
Also joining me is someone cosplaying Parshendi, is Evgeni.
You know, I hadn't thought of that.
Because you have the things in your beard.
No, now that I look at myself, as opposed to other times when I look at myself.
Wait, this isn't what you were planning on doing? That wasn't your point?
This was just a holiday thing. In fact, I think it was your fiance who suggested that. So,
oh, really?
I figured, that's a fun practical joke to do, even though the holidays are over.
Yeah, we're recording this after New Year's and we'll be out 2 weeks after New Year's. So I am so glad we're on it.
But yeah, no, I think this is great.
And you jingle.
And I...
Incredible. So when you're very angry, we'll know because you'll just be like jingling furiously.
Well, also, all my balls are going to fall off because they're not very stable right now.
Argent's balls are not stable. All right. Also joining us is Grace.
Hello, I'm GatorGirl on the forums.
And also joining us for the first time is Marvin.
Hi, I'm Paleo.
Welcome. Yeah. Yes, we recently made you staff, and you are a wonderful human. So welcome. And you also spent way too much money on podcast equipment, so here's your reward.
I didn't spend any of the money, so yeah, they were Christmas presents, so great.
Oh, well, even better. Well, then get out. You don't get a reward. You get out of here. And I'm Chaos, and this week we're going to talk about WoBs from the Starsight release, which there's a lot of. Mm-hmm. But first, before we do that, as Evgeni mentioned, I am now engaged, and I wanted to share you my lovely story of my proposal, because Jess and I met on the Coppermind, because she edited a bunch of stuff, and then we made her Coppermind staff. Then we started talking, and we just never stopped talking, ever. So that was fun. So last year, we went on a really fancy date where we got into I got into a suit, she got into a fancy dress, and we went to a fancy restaurant on New Year's. So we did the same thing this time, and I'm like, okay, it's got to be Coppermindy and nerdy. So I'm going to edit the Coppermind main page with the proposal. But the thing is I didn't quite know how to get the online part with the in-person part. So what I did, she and we blab about Coppermind edits all the time. Where it's like, oh, can you believe this happened? Can you believe this happened? And it's like, what do you think about this edit? What do you think about this edit? So I go to the bathroom and then I save the edit. And I needed to turn off my Wi-Fi hotspot because she doesn't have an American SIM card. Because I knew as soon as I go to the bathroom, she'll immediately go to her phone and check Coppermind recent changes. I'm like, no, you can't do that. No. So I turned off her Wi-Fi hotspot so she couldn't do that. And so I go back.
Didn't rise up any red flags on her part?
Well, she figured that the bathroom was just too far away, but she did have a suspicion that the proposal was going to happen because apparently I was nervous the whole day. just terrified the whole day.
What do you mean that's not a relaxing experience for you?
It was not. We talk about everything, so planning a surprise is hard. I mean, we talked about being engaged, so that was not a problem. So I sat down, we talked about how amazing she is, because she is amazing, perfect, nerdy, and gorgeous. She's just the best. And then in the middle of that, I'm like, hey, I saw this great edit on the Coppermind, which this is pretty standard for us to do. But she would later say, that was a pretty hard right turn there. And so I get out my phone and show her the edited page, and she looked at the Coppermind main page, and I had a top quote that was lovey, and she's like, there shouldn't be a top quote on the Coppermind. And then I'm like, Jess, she's like, who did this? I'm like, Jess, read the next sentence. She's like, oh. And so it worked out really nice.
Respect.
And the fact that was her first reaction.
I know, it was literally
why she's perfect for you.
It really is. And I remember later she edited a response in the proposal there, and she was typing her response. And meanwhile, as she did this, she was like patrolling other Coppermind edits and like reverting some edits. It was like, yeah, that shouldn't be there. That should be there. So that's just how dedicated she is. But gotta thank Brandon, because without Brandon, I would never have met the love of my life, because she's Australian. And so I literally never would have had any reason to contact her. So
maybe you could have met on the Kingkiller wiki.
I mean, she hasn't even read book 2 of that, and I'm like, yeah, you might as well wait till book 3 comes out. It's like, you might as well.
Yeah, but then she's never gonna read the series.
Hey.
Something.
So that was my lovely holiday, and so people on Reddit were requesting a summary, and people were like, oh man, it was a 4-hour response of hers. I'm like, we were in person. She said it to me in person. She didn't like edit it right there. I had time to prepare my words, and she was very, very overwhelmed. So it took her a while to figure out what she wanted to write, which ended up being like a sentence. So
scene period.
But it took her like a half hour to write that sentence actually later.
But a really lovely quote from Sayzed, so
yeah. See, actually, the fun story about that Sayzed quote that she put there is that at Matt's wedding, Matt's been on the podcast, and I went to his wedding. And he had his pastor actually read that quote from Sayzed about the lock and key and how they fit together. I'm like, oh yeah, Cosmere wedding. So on mine, I'm like, well, because that was already used before, I can't do that. So I have to find something else. Then I'm like looking at Dalinar and Navani's wedding. I'm like, oh, there's nothing good for this here. Like, that doesn't work at all. So I eventually came up with something. But so that was my fun time. So it was lovely. She'll be here eventually, but her Australian internet is too terrible to be on this show. So, all right, let's talk about what has happened in the Starsight release. There was no Starsight tour, so unlike the previous year, where we had 5 episodes of Skyward Tour words of Brandon, we don't have that this time. Yeah.
There is some other news.
Oh, yeah.
There's some like very other.
Oh, yeah. We gotta talk about that first. Sorry, I got distracted with my. The other news actually happened the same day as the day I proposed. So, Brandon finished the rough draft of Stormlight 4.
Whoa!
Woo!
Yeah.
He
Woo.
trudged through like 19,000 words.
Yeah, 19,000.
19,000 words in 13 hours, as my newsfeed and Reddit and Twitter and Tumblr keep informing me on a daily basis. Because literally every day somebody's like, memes about 19,000 words in 13 hours.
He really doesn't do that often, but just for endings. And Brandon said, man, it's so exciting to get to write some scenes that I've been planning since 2001. So I'm pretty hyped.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah, like apparently the Wit epilogue is something he's planned for a really long time.
And watch out for the shameful ribbon.
Oh yeah, the shameful ribbon. So at one point in the whole, like, I don't remember if it was Twitter or Reddit, but somebody asked, like, how can we tell in book where you are at this exact moment? And he said to look out for a shameful ribbon.
I mean, so if that's not like cut or rewritten.
Yeah, assuming it's not cut. Though since he said it, I think there's a higher chance he'll keep it.
Yeah. I'd say
there's still a chance it could be cut. So
theory, Vivenna is in the end, and there's a ribbon that she awakened, and it's very shameful for reasons.
Or it's Bayon with a ribbon of sand.
Oh, yeah. Shameful. Kenton's here, and he's like, hey, how's it going, guys? I heard you guys have Fabrials, so I wanted to make a boombox. light weaving a boombox, because it can do both sound and light. So easy.
Yeah.
So he did that, and so now we'll talk about the words of Brandon. And he read a Eshonai flashback. I think he's decided to do a combo of Eshonai and Venli flashbacks, which I know we talked about on an earlier episode. I think great idea. That sounds fantastic. And there's not really, to be honest, that much in this Eshonai chapter, which was really more Brandon trying to get Eshonai's voice again. So it was more of a tone thing than something we'll actually see in the book. But was there anything interesting to talk about in this?
There was one thing I noticed now. This does have the caveat that all of this could be wrong continuity-wise and could get totally changed. But Eshonai does say in this flashback that the war camps, at least she believes, were created by singers, which I think is interesting.
That is actually really interesting, considering we thought that it was a satellite city of Stormseat, right?
That's the previous theory that I think Shallan had.
Yeah, but that doesn't need to be true.
No, it doesn't.
Nice jingling, Argent. This is going to be incredible. So yeah, that is interesting. If they were ancient singer cities, then that would... I just want to know ancient Natanaton history. Like, that sounds incredible.
Right.
Don't we know that? Wasn't it built by Queen Saw?
Yeah, that's all we need, right? She supped with the moon. It's easy. That's canonical.
It is interesting to consider that. I mean, Stormseat was a human city, like we know that.
Yes.
And while we don't have the details of when exactly it fell, we assume it was during the same thing that shattered the planes, right?
Yeah.
I would think that is a good probability.
That seems like the sensible time for the kingdom to break.
Right.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense for the city to have fallen first, because then why would they bother shattering the planes?
Yeah, right.
And it doesn't make sense for the city to survive after that.
Well, but we also know that according to the listener songs, it was the humans who messed up the planes.
Well, it wasn't the singer gods.
It was not our gods.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
It's obviously a Dawn Shard. Stormseat could have been could have been a Dawn city, though, that the humans later inhabited. So, like,
okay, I think that's
possible. Because presumably, like, all the Dawn cities used to be ancient singer things that the humans just later inhabited and put their own buildings there.
So the mosaic map we have for Stormseat is not symmetrical.
It is
like in any way. So Roshar is like symmetry. So if it was symmetrical, I think that would have been reflected. Makes it like less likely in my mind that it is actually a Dawn city, like Kholinar or Thaylen City.
And it is also not brought up as one of the examples that Capsal mentions all the way in book 1.
Yeah. Oh man, that's interesting, because symmetry is definitely like Voron stuff and presumably like honor influence. Hard to say what the Dawn singers felt about that, right? With the symmetry, because asymmetry is of odium, right? So with you saying it is not symmetrical, I'm like, well, that is evidence that it's actually more singery than humany.
Well, but here's the thing. So if the Dawn cities were originally singer cities, and we keep tossing this idea around that they sang the cities into existence in some way using the surges.
Sure, okay.
And because of what we've seen with the demonstration with like the reason when you do the semantics thing, the reason you get symmetric shapes is just because of how the vibrations and the sound waves work. And so that symmetry there is not necessarily of honor or of cultivation or of odium or not of odium or whatever.
Yeah, sure. It is just because how the natural forces work. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And it's like singers are very associated with sound and the rhythm.
Very, very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's the sound of Roshar itself or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
True.
Rereading the paragraph with where she mentions the camps, she says that yes, listeners could create mighty walls. I assume she just talks about the singers as a listener because she is a listener.
Because she doesn't know the difference at that time.
But what if she does? And actually, the camps were created by the last Legion, like when they were still bigger or more people.
I think that's possible.
Yeah.
It is possible, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then as the war happened, they were pushed or decided to move to a more defensible position, which was the middle of the plains.
Yeah, we know that she or somewhere it's mentioned that they inhabited more of the plains beforehand. Yeah, yep. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, that's an interesting idea, though. Just that the Shattered Plains could have been shattered first, and then the last Legion built the camps after that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, that is totally possible.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think it is, yeah.
From the sound really it sounds like the camps are relatively well inhabited. Like, she says that they have all 10 camps, so that would fit that they created them specifically for themselves.
And
unless they moved there.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the camps are right at the edge of the plains, so it does seem kind of weird that there would just so happen to be 10 cities, small cities, right where the Shattered Plains stopped if they were built before.
Yeah, and it's they're in a curving line along the border.
Yeah,
which that is suspicious. That is very suspicious.
I
always suspicious of curved lines.
Yeah.
Curved lines are a Vodium.
I like how we're there's nothing in this too much before the show, and I was like, what about this one line? What about the history of Natanaton? We should do a Natanaton podcast, but there's not that much there. One other line that I found interesting was they would sit by the fire and complain that she was stealing cultivation secrets away. And, just mentioning cultivation is always interesting. Who knows if that'll be edited out, of course. This entire scene might not even be here.
That's true. I think
and there is an odd colored Kremlin, which Bren later said might be interesting, but
any odd colored Kremlin people should take notice of.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do some WoBs. We got to crank through some WoBs here.
So,
all right.
This first one, the questioner asks, what would happen if Azure's sword was wielded against Nightblood? To which Brandon answers, if Azure's sword was wielded against Nightblood, terrible things would happen. But Nightblood would be the stronger of the pair. So
what terrible things could this be? Also, we should probably go into WoB mode, huh? That'd probably be good.
Yes, we should.
Probably. Yeah.
Ripping the hole through the realms. I don't know.
But why? That a Shardblade can kill a Spren. This is just kind of like a Spren in the physical as a sword, right?
Yeah.
What sort of terrible things could even happen? This doesn't seem that exotic.
I don't know why that comes to my mind, but have any of you played the game Death Stranding?
No, but I've read Ben. I've read Ben talk about the game, and it sounds insane.
Yeah, it is. I haven't played too much yet because I haven't had time, but yeah, it's really good. But anyways, there are these events called void outs, and it's just these massive explosions where entire cities are annihilated in an instant, and it happens if two in the game is sort of opposing. It's antimatter and matter collide. That image sort of comes to my mind when I read that. That's the terrible thing that would happen. It would just annihilate the entire, I don't know,
that's
continent.
Interesting to think about.
Nightblood is an invested black hole, sort of ish, versus what theoretically Nightblood should have been. We don't know if Azure's blade consumes investiture. But I feel like if you had two things that consume an investiture against each other, and they both start consuming the other, like, yeah, eventually Nightblood would win, but like that interplay of like consumption could be very, very bad.
I think we know that when Azure's blade hits someone, it's not just their limbs turn gray or like cut off, like with the sharp blade, the whole person turns gray. Like, so there's a little bit of investiture consumption, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe it's just more of a personal, terrible thing, like Nightblood has like an existential crisis or something. Like, this is what I was supposed to be.
I never read too much into this WoB. Like, I see why you guys are having that discussion, but to me, Brandon's words, like the first half of his answer, doesn't really mean anything to me. It just seems like fluff. And the meat of it is, well, Nightblood is stronger.
I mean, it's very reasonable that they just both die.
Ultimately, like most things that happen with Nightblood are terrible things.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
that's fair.
That is a fair and accurate point.
Somebody asks whether Bavadin's avatars are inaudible, which is
if only they had a boombox, then they could make it audible again.
Not a sponsor of the show.
To clarify, this means we couldn't hear the question well enough.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, it's not that it was actually saying that.
And Brandon says one of Bavadin's avatars. Questioner clarifies, of those avatars, are some or all of them actual splinters of autonomy?
Oh boy.
Brent says, the terminology gets kind of tricky here. In Cosmere terms, some would say that counts as splinters. Some would say not. The avatars aren't necessarily aware, but Bavadin always is. A lot of people in the Cosmere would call that a splinter.
Okay.
Follow-up from the questioner. My follow-up to that would be, is it possible for a person to ascend and become a vessel of one of those splinters? That's plausible, says Brandon. Yes, it could happen. It would be tough because they will have personalities of their own, and so something would need to happen.
Huh.
Now, I haven't checked, and so I don't know. But I did ask, like somebody was asking for questions in the Discord. And I workshopped an idea with them. I had a theory. No, we talked about this in a previous episode.
We talked about this, and
So I think it was Pod who was asking for questions, and I gave him mine, which was, hey, I have this theory that avatars are like vessels, but for splinters.
Yeah, and so we have that WoB as well.
Pod asked, the combination of a shard and its vessel leads to sapient mind with access to a virtually infinite pool of investiture. Are avatars the product of a similar combination of a mind and a pool of investiture, only on a smaller scale with less power? Brandon responded, I would say that is an accurate representation of what an avatar is. It's not the only way, but it is inaccurate. Some avatars are that. I would say that's the standard.
Okay.
Interesting.
So that second question is one that I asked Pod to ask on my behalf, because I've talked on a previous, I think it was in the avatars and autonomy episode.
The autonomy episode,
that I postulated pretty much the same theory, right?
Yeah, right.
And so these two go together.
Can we talk about what this sentence Brandon said was? The previous sentences, in Cosmere terms, some would say that counts as splinters, some would say not. The avatars aren't necessarily aware, but Bavadin always is. What does that sentence mean?
Well, I think that means that not all avatars are sapient. Like how not all Spren are sapient.
Oh, that the avatars are themselves
always aware of her avatars. Like as soon as an avatar becomes an avatar, he's like she knows. Like she is aware of that power.
And I think it's not necessarily that the avatars are unsapient or sentient, but that they simply don't know that they're simply an avatar. Like they're not as much as a part of the hive mind as let's say like Patchy clearly was aware that or at least that she's an entity connected to autonomy. I'd say like.
Okay, so
that's a good point.
The avatars don't need to be aware of.
Yeah, exactly.
The others
that they're avatar. Well,
that's a really good point.
Or at least that they are in a collection of these other things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which does work
they might
with...
not necessarily even know like autonomy exists.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
And we have had an older but still recent WoB that confirms that the moment an avatar comes into existence, Bavadin becomes aware of them.
Yeah. Yeah, so that part's new.
And sort of in reverse, that if Bavadin becomes aware of some of the investiture, they will often turn it, or they might turn it into an avatar. Like that was what happened with Patchy, for instance.
Sure, yeah.
I find it interesting that it's these in-world things. Some would call it a splinter. It's like, great, can't wait to rewrite the Splinter and Sliver articles on the wiki from our ancient WoBs to what we know now, and it's just so muddy at this stage.
Just make those articles like bullet points of things that we know for a fact.
Great! Everyone loves articles that are lists.
And don't bother trying to connect them into a cohesive whole, because who knows what that whole is.
So the giant disclaimer on top, at the top, this point, this topic is very is a great point of contention for Cosmere scholars, or something like that. Like for everyone.
Brandon isn't sure what to call this.
Brandon can't make up his mind.
Brandon can't make up his mind.
There are people in the Cosmere who believe that.
Great, love it. I think it's interesting that that this is the standard way. That a mind and a pool of investiture. But I also find that interesting because their first question is like, hey, is it possible for the person to ascend and become a vessel of the splinter? But Brandon's like, they would already have personalities. Which is somewhat contradictory.
Maybe there's the distinction between like a sentient avatar and a non-sentient one. Like there can be one that just is like a blob of power and sort of that Patchy is that autonomy is aware of, but and that is something a person could ascend to. And there's then things like Patchy that are sentient blobs of investiture. Sort of. But,
I wonder if becoming an avatar is like if becoming a vessel for an avatar is even more like being a vessel than being a vessel of a shard. So like if you are the vessel of a shard, it's to an extent a symbiotic process. Like the shard naturally tries to overwrite you with itself, and so you kind of become the shard. But I wonder if being a vessel for an avatar is more like you're being scooped out and emptied out, and now this maybe splinter, maybe blob of power is like coming in and just wearing you as a set of clothing. So kind of like possession, but not.
Since like we don't know like the exact mechanics of how an avatar is formed, like there might be an element of human sacrifice involved, where, well, not like formally, but like
you give yourself to the power,
or autonomy.
Autonomy
like,
just grabs you. Yeah,
useful. I am going to pluck out your mind and soul and use it as like the framework for this avatar I'm making.
I think that's possible.
And so, like, is that technically being a vessel, or is like, because it's not like that person is then ascending. Like, it's a very different process.
Yes, I'm taking your framework and I'm making you into something new.
Yeah.
Maybe it's nice. Not even turning someone into something new. Maybe autonomy can just like sort of copy their spirit web and plug it onto investiture, like just she needs a template to build an avatar, but she doesn't necessarily have to consume the template, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but then I don't think the person or the being
of course, then,
by that.
So
then it's a question whether you really ascend then, or whether it's just like you.
I would say that is not ascension at all.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is, in my mind, on one end you have like a Nahel bond, and on the other end you have Shardic ascension, and avatars are somewhere in the middle. In terms of like power, and perhaps also with how the mind and the power combine.
Mm-hmm.
So the power, I think, is obvious to me, right? Mm-hmm. So with Shard, you get all the power. With the Hellbond, the power is still the Sprens, but you can get that. And so if you are an avatar, you get more power than you would. Like, you get more direct control over the power than you would with a Spren. I don't see how the other half of that works necessarily, because with an Hellbond, it's a symbiotic relationship, right? And with a Shard, it's an almost complete. It's not an override, but it's a.
The power's shaping you in a very extreme way,
and you can resist, but the power is still like the big player.
Question.
Yes.
When you ascend to a shard, your body dissolves.
Yes, correct.
Do we, and like some people have called that like the mist point, where it's like, because it's like, Vin like started leaking mist and then like she poofed.
Yep.
Do we think,
like the term.
Being an avatar is beyond the mist point? Do you lose your physical form, or could you be like a person walking around and an avatar?
I was really hoping you wouldn't ask that question.
I think
that's why I'm here, to ask the questions that annoy you.
That would fit more with the classical definition of an avatar, because it's sort of like you're just a conduit for the power, like a representation of it rather than the power. Like,
yes, that would actually make me hate the term much less.
One thing that I keep coming back to, which is related to this, is obviously Trell.
Yeah,
because it feels like we're narrowing down on who Trell is and what Trell is, right? We have all the way back on Taldane this person who is seemingly just a stonemason or a like a stone worker. I don't think at that point he's anyone special.
Yeah, I agree.
And then we move forward several hundreds, maybe thousands of years, and now we have a DT on Scadrial, and it is inconceivable to me that they are unrelated.
Yes. Can we read the next WoB?
Yes, we should read the next WoB.
Okay. So the question asks, in Volume 2 of White Sand, there's a character named Trell. Is that intentional? And Brennan answered, yes, that is intentional, but the connections are a little more obtuse than we may be expecting. So there's that.
So I read that and I think, so Trell is probably not a vessel in the way that we classically think of it.
I agree.
How we classically think of vessels as vessels
like
of shards.
A person absorbing a bunch of investiture and then they can control it, right? That like what Vin did.
Okay.
I do not think that is what's happening there. I like the idea of needing some template.
And as far as Trell the foreman is concerned, we had a relatively... The WoB itself is old, but somebody recently revealed on Reddit that he asked Brandon like a few years back whether the foreman or Trell the foreman was directly related to the thing on Scadrial, and the answer was yes. So there's also like that is even stronger than this WoB. So
okay.
Yeah. It just feels like he's an avatar.
Yeah. But if the connection is more obtuse, then maybe that fits with the idea of like autonomy just snatching Trell the foreman and forcing him to become an avatar. Like he didn't ascend in the classical sense.
Right.
Like,
but like his mind is used as a template for the power to build this avatar.
And so we're thinking that like maybe the personality of the original mortal Trell is either gone or like super minimized or erased or something like that.
It's not necessarily like it forms the bedrock of the avatar. The original human would have to have some sort of effect on the avatar is created, but it's not really him anymore.
It's like a copy. Like a spiritual copy.
Like a foundation.
Yeah, it's foundation more than a copy.
So it's the avatar has its own personality and its own motives and its own agenda and whatever, but it's still true. Like it still has something of the original Trell. Let's say memories, for example.
Sorry, let me rephrase what I mean by copy. I mean, because you're right. I'm imagining like you take the spirit web and the soul of the original, you copy that, but then you build on top of that. So yeah.
Like, I'm not even saying like you copy it. You take the original and you start ripping it apart and inserting. Like she uses.
Oh, okay, sure, yeah, fine.
Actual spirit web as the foundation.
Okay,
like
which
she
kills Trell as he was.
Essentially, to make a like not literally, but like spiritually spiking out the part she wants into the pushing it into the power.
And maybe that sort of is required for her to. Even like she could create an avatar without a template, but that would just be like
a non-sapient one.
Yeah, a non-sapient dumb like blob of investiture. But if she takes some template and turns that into an avatar, she can then imbue it with like a mission. Like for example, for Trell, go to Skaedriel and like invade it for me. Maybe that's like she has to take an existing spirit web because she's not powerful enough or doesn't know, or maybe it's just simply impossible to create something entirely new.
Or if she does use a template, like she has more control over the mind that develops. Like yes, investiture on its own will like develop its own mind, but the personality that develops might not want to do what she needs it to do. So like she doesn't necessarily want to take that gamble. It's like, oh, I could spin off this piece of investiture. When do children ever do what their parents want them to do?
What was the phrasing of like we imbued with her a dislike of you in the letter to Void or something like that?
There's definitely evidence of that.
She's been instilled with a strong dislike.
So that definitely sounds like she's designing a thing.
It's interesting because I would have gone the exact opposite direction, actually, Ian. I would have said autonomy, Bavadin would probably prefer avatars over just essentially Splinter, right? If you're building, quote, I'm using a lot of air quotes here with these words. If you're building an avatar without a vessel, then that's just a Splinter. Then I would have seen that as like just an extension of Bavadin, which is not very autonomous. It's just like an extra limb.
I don't think we understand fully what Bavadin's opinion of autonomy is.
We don't. We don't.
Because people have argued that point back and forth. It's like, like it's a gray area when it comes to what is autonomy.
Oh boy,
what is autonomy?
What is self?
But circling back to Trell a little bit, I think if we think of the avatar vessels as a foundation or a bedrock for the entire avatar, then I think it makes a lot of sense that the religion that evolved around Trell on Skaedriel had so many callbacks to Taldane.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because some of those memories would have carried over, not necessarily in their purest form, but as ideas. And especially we know that religions morph like throughout time into the idea carries forward, but the facts are often lost.
Sure.
I'm just very skeptical that original like classical Skaedriel Trell was like this avatar. Like I think that part is a coincidence.
That is a weird aspect to this.
Because I just don't think those timelines match. I don't think White Sand is that much earlier than Mistborn by like several thousand years.
Yeah, that's tricky.
For like the Nelazon like culture and religion to evolve.
We don't know how long, like nowadays, new religions spring up relatively fast, I'd say. Like there are some that are less than 50 years old, maybe. So like depends on like, it could have been, but yeah, it's really difficult to match up the timelines. Or White Sand would have been really early. But
yeah. And then like the fact that Preservation and Ruin make zero mention that another shard is edging in on their territory. Yeah. Like I think that would have been like a very like important topic.
I posit that autonomy in the past used future sight and saw a possibility, went into Scradrial, made one tiny little change to this, like maybe created this religion, left without anyone noticing, and it wasn't necessarily this is going to be useful, but it could be useful in the future.
I mean, I don't hate it.
Like it's
I don't want to like it as much as I do.
Like put a little seed there and then see if it does grow into something useful. And so Ruin and Preservation wouldn't really notice because it's too minor.
Maybe she sent a small group of like a few people there, and while Ruin and Preservation weren't looking, they went through the pits of Hessin and like built a colony. The pits didn't exist.
Taldane world hoppers.
Yeah.
Who really liked this craftsman.
He wasn't even born yet.
Yeah, he will have been born in the spiritual realm, so all is okay.
Easy.
There is also like
nailed it.
The interesting dichotomy of Nault.
Yeah.
From that religion.
Yeah. Like for all we know, there is a guy on Taldane named Nault, and another possibility was that he was the template for the Avatar.
Yeah, but like autonomy is very associated with this, or the Sand Lord, I think, is associated with the sun.
Yep.
So it's like that, like the Nelazon didn't like the sun, which is the stand-in for autonomy. They liked Nault, and not they liked Trell. So it's like that whole thing is just confusing.
I can't wait for some more books to shed light on this, because the more we talk about it, it's like, wow, this is the weeds. In fact, how about we move past some of the weeds and talk about some other weeds?
Oh God, please.
Different weeds. So this questioner asks, so Cell, Investiture has been pushed into the cognitive realm. Threnody, has it seen something similar? Brandon, it has not seen, okay, yes, something similar, it would count. Something similar, yes. Questioner, so if that's the case, what would happen if you were to push Investiture into the physical realm? Brandon, it generally manifests either as a solid, liquid, or gas, which we knew. Questioner, I thought about that. I was like, we've seen that, but it seemed like a concentrated form. What if you did that for a whole shard? Brandon, that would probably have disastrous effects. Questioner, that's why I was thinking for Threnody, but if it hasn't been that, then something else happened. Brandon, it hasn't been that, something else happened. So, a few interesting things that if you push an entire shard into the physical, that's really bad. Kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, though. Like, I've never thought of this concept before, and now I'm in complete love with it.
It's like, it would matter where you did it. Because, like, it would make it in a lot of matter.
Yeah, imagine.
So if you did it on a planet, that would be very, very bad. If you create another whole planet's worth of matter, or potentially more.
Okay, but that's kind of a boring explanation, though, isn't it?
the cognitive anomaly on Nalthis is where endowment temporarily left the spiritual realm.
By the way, there were a number of questions on the cognitive anomaly, which I did not include because they were all RAFO'd, and one part was just like, everything about the cognitive anomaly is a RAFO. That's what Brandon said.
It's a hard RAFO.
It exists to torture us for the next 10 years.
Vax 2.0.
Yeah. Just, I think, to put it into some context, so isn't Scadrial like made of ruin and preservation investiture, basically?
Yep.
That's an entire planet already, so...
yeah.
And they got more to spare.
They got plenty more to spare. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I have a question on Brandon saying that Threnody something similar happened. Like the investiture pushing in the cognitive. So like maybe that's a tenuous bond. I don't know how in depth we can talk about that. Like what does that mean?
So what happened on Cell was that there were 2 shards there and they got splintered, and all, or at least most of their investiture got squished together and shoved into the cognitive realm.
Yes.
Where it is now this tempest of investiture, right? So with this in mind, what is similar to that, right? So we could either have like a fraction of 1 shards or 2 shards of investiture being shifted from one realm to another. I think that would be similar. Yeah, that's about it.
But we do know something that happened in the Threnodite system.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is that Odium dealt a grievous blow to Ambition, but did not kill her there. She died somewhere else. And her investiture sprayed across the system and changed things.
And I think we know that Ambition was splintered. I'm not sure, but I think she was.
I don't think we know that.
All we know is she died elsewhere.
Yeah, but if she was splintered, or maybe part of her got splintered, and that's what happened on Threnody, because Dominion and Devotion also got splintered, and that's what resulted, because Odium didn't know what he was doing. That resulted in them getting pushed into the cognitive realm.
No, Odium did that intentionally.
Yeah. So he didn't know. He knew he wanted to splinter the power, so it becomes inaccessible to anyone else. But he was not yet experienced in that, and so his solution at the moment was, well, I'm just going to shove it all into cognitive, and then nobody's going to be able to take it. That he knew how to do, and he knew that that's exactly what he was doing. It's the end goal of, I want to make sure that nobody picks up this power that he was not yet fully knowledgeable in.
Okay. There's another weird thing in the Threnodite system, which is the planet named Purity, which sounds an awful lot like a shard.
Yeah.
You know what Purity is? A physical anomaly.
Yeah. It is also unlike any of the other planets' names.
Yeah.
It's true, yeah.
There's a pattern. It does not match.
Yeah.
Which, as you know, listeners, I do not like.
So, here's a theory, okay? It's not a real theory. I'm just saying words.
Okay.
Odium went after him. So, we know that the timeline of events, he goes after Ambition, doesn't find her, goes after Devotion and Dominion, finds them, does its thing, and then goes back to Ambition. He goes there the second time, finds Ambition, cuts off her arm, and shoves it into the physical realm.
And that becomes Purity?
Or influences Purity in a way more significant than Threnody, where we know there are unstable perpendicularities and things like that.
I have an idea. What if somewhere else in the Threnodite system, he kind of did something similar where investiture gets shoved into the cognitive realm, and then there's investiture wind currents or whatever that, because it's a giant tempest, push out away from the initial spot and end up affecting things on other planets nearby.
Huh.
If it happened in space, like in the middle of the system, that would fit because in the cognitive, that space is all compressed, and that's the way it ended up on Threnody. Like,
well,
it could work,
yeah, that's true. I mean, their battle affected all three realms, so
so I don't see any issue with like that combat between shards affecting an entire system.
Yeah.
Let's try a different angle. Let's
obtuse.
Love it. Let's go with it.
It's certainly not sold. The right angle.
So let's go from Odium's perspective, right? So from his perspective, what's happening is goes after ambition, doesn't find her, goes after devotion and dominion, finds them, goes, okay, I now have I figured out a way to destroy the vessels and do something with the power so that it becomes inaccessible to other people. And that something is, well, kill the vessels. I don't really know if we can say which realm he killed them in.
Yeah, hard to say.
And so he either lured the vessels into the cognitive and killed them there and then just kind of dragged their power into the cognitive, or he killed them into the spiritual and then shoved the investiture into the cognitive, or maybe he tricked them to pull their own investiture into the cognitive and then he killed them and then that investiture got trapped there. But regardless, we know what the end effect is. And then he goes after ambition. We put a pause on that. He does something there. And then he goes to Roshar. And we know that one of the effects of him visiting Roshar is the splintering of Odium, honor.
The broken one.
Spoilers.
Broken one.
I'm sorry. I've read Stormlight 10.
The broken one reigns.
He splinters honor. And it is very safe to assume that Odium has been learning all this time.
Yeah.
And so he goes from, I'm destroying shards by shoving their investiture into the cognitive, to I am destroying shards by splintering them and dispersing their investiture. So all the different splinters, all the different pieces of that shard form their own consciousness. And then like nobody can ascend because they're all individual human beings, and you will have to be like Kaladin and eat all the honor sprint.
Yep, right. Yeah.
And at the end of Oathbringer, we see him learn another lesson. He decides that this is not enough. He needs to completely demolish the planet and any investiture that is there. And so
is that
there's a step. Yeah. He says that it's not enough to splinter honor and...
Well, he just has to deal with the splinters of honor. I don't think he said destroy the planet. That's not what he said. He just said he would transform this realm substantially. That's different.
Okay, perhaps.
I mean, transform into not a planet.
Okay,
is
fine.
Possible, but
fine. I don't have evidence to back this up right now, but it sounds to me like his takeaway from his experience with honor is that he can't leave little bits of investiture. Like he needs to essentially grind the shard into dust. And so the only step that we know of missing in his plan from Cell to Roshar is his experience with ambition.
Right.
And so I think whatever he did with ambition needs to be something it's not identical to what happened to Cell. It's not identical to what happened on Roshar, but it needs to be something that he goes, okay, I did this thing with ambition. Now I'm going after honor and cultivation. How did I learn from my experience with ambition so that I can turn honor into little pieces?
That's interesting to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think one possible takeaway of this is, what if I rip ambition into like big pieces, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily saying that I subscribe to that idea, that I believe in it, but I'm using it to illustrate a point. And so with Devotion and Dominion, he pulled the entire body or bodies of the shards into the cognitive. with honor, he split them into like little pieces. What if with ambition, he like ripped the arms and the legs and the head of the shard? And either threw some of them into the cognitive or maybe into the physical, or like he dispersed them between the realms. So he left like a leg and an arm in the spiritual, and then the head and the other leg in the cognitive, and then I don't know what's left, but that goes into the physical.
Huh.
I also don't know anything about the physiology of the Shodel, so I don't know how many legs.
Because the ambition was Shodel.
Yeah. Well, I don't have anything to add, but I like the idea of that progression of what Odium was thinking about, and so I definitely have to think about that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I guess I had just been picturing what happened in the Drenadite system more as like blood spatter, more than like an arm being ripped off.
Well,
but, yeah,
that's a good point too.
But it's weird.
But it was the killing blow, or like not the killing blow, but a mortal blow, to ambition. That so it was kind of a big deal. So
yeah.
I just want to know more about what Odium's doing. So cool. Mm-hmm. How about we progress potentially deeper in the weeds with this next one?
Yeah.
I think this podcast is going to be called The Weeds, because we've definitely gotten really in depth on the weeds here, like a lot.
This next questioner asks, you have mentioned that the shards, they did not make an oath to have only one per planet, although the suggestion was made. Have any of the shards made an oath that has bound themselves, expecting the others to follow suit? Brandon, yes. Oaths have been made that have been unwise oaths. You have seen one of these, the oath between ruin and preservation. But that's not the only example of oaths being used in ways that bind the shards in ways they weren't expecting.
So this comes out of our discussion when we learned about the pact. And how a suggestion was made, but not oaths, and a few panelists thought that potentially some of them may have made oaths for this. So I'm going to go with yes on that. And Brandon's just using concrete examples that we've seen before.
Yeah, because Brandon doesn't quite answer the question that was asked.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an interesting answer regardless.
Yes.
Also, I think another example is a variety of oaths that maybe Honor and Odium did, because Odium definitely has not expected everything that has occurred, and he had, as Honor said, Odium has lost before, you know, and so I think that's probably, we're going to learn about those mistakes that Odium made, I'm sure. These are examples of that, but I'm gonna go with that. Maybe a few shards did make an oath on that pact.
The binding of Odium feels very pacty, very oathy.
I kind of suspect Dominion and Devotion probably made some oaths to each other.
Teo.
But if you say that the binding of Odium feels like an oath to you, like an oath between, or who made the oath? Was it just Honor, or because Odium wouldn't swear that he would like Brace? That's like, he was bound there.
I mean,
or do you just mean that the same principles of an oath?
So I think it would be incredibly difficult for Honor, or even Honor and Cultivation, to bind Odium against his will on either Braze or Roshar, because I think it's still unclear where he's bound.
Right, yeah.
I think some of this has to involve some kind of deal, some kind of negotiation, probably between Honor, because he's the bondage guy, and Odium.
I mean, it
could be something as simple as Honor convinced Odium to stay in the system until things were dealt with between them, and between like the three of them, and Odium just figured he could finish them off quickly and didn't care about making that oath.
It's like a trick.
So Yeah, I'm not necessarily thinking. I'm not necessarily thinking that this is like Honor convincing Odium to like send himself to prison, but it's some kind of a deal that escalated or de-escalated, or
didn't work out
worse.
the way they expected.
Yeah.
Yes, sort of like Preservation Ruin, where Ruin, or Preservation said Ruin would eventually get to fulfill his goals, but
I don't think
not
Honor
to that extent.
I don't think Honor had trickery in mind. I think Honor would have offered and made an honest deal, and just because humans are involved or mortals are involved, things got hairy.
Yeah, things aren't resolving as fast as Odium thought they would. Like he probably
like that.
entered this deal thinking like, okay, like I'll be stuck here for like 500 years, like no big deal. And now it's like, okay, I've been here for 6,000 years.
Keep the desolations keep occurring.
Yeah. And you say Honor would have made an honest deal, but would Cultivation have if she was involved?
But Honor gets to release Odium, not Cultivation.
That is true.
So like,
and we know that
gets to do that.
I have to imagine Cultivation had some input on whatever the terms of the deal were.
I imagine they crafted it together, but Honor did the actual binding.
Like, Cultivation is the one who is better at future sight of the two.
That's true.
Like,
That's true.
So she may have been more of an advisor type of thing.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's move on to WoB number 5, I think. 5 in an hour sounds good.
Oh, God.
No, it's 7. This is WoB 7.
Oh boy, page 3 of 14.
We're not gonna have 5 episodes. Anyway.
Hey.
No. On the rails, Eric.
And in the weeds.
And
be on the rails.
Who invited this guy? Pod, my top nth favorite person in the world, asks, you've said that you would call Surge Binding, Void Binding, and Fabrials the 3 magics on Roshar. Would it be more accurate to say that Surge Binding followed and emulated Fabrials, and or the possibility of Fabrials, or vice versa? Vice versa, says Brandon. Fabrials are generally Surge Binders first, Fabrials second. So you couldn't have done Fabrials when it was just Adonalsium, asks Pod, and Brandon says, before the Shattering. Pod continues, would the Spren have still been able to do Surges then? And Brandon says, I would say no. No, Adonalsium probably would not have let that happen. You could theoretically do it if Adonalsium allowed it. Pod says he had boundaries against it. Brandon, yes. So I would say no.
Wow, this is crazy.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff going on here.
Really is, yeah.
Adonalsium would not allow the Spren to do surgy things. Wow.
Surges are dangerous, man. Destroyed Ashen.
Yeah.
There's another WoB that talks about Adonalsium and like the way he or they perceived reality, and so that's how reality was.
So there was another word of Brandon that was really relevant to this that actually happened at a random high school signing. We have a few. Brandon was at a high school, and a few people asked questions. That is what happened. It was after the release, but it wasn't a real signing. Anyway, we have a few things from it. Okay.
This one was by Pod again. They asked, you said at the Starsight release that Adonalsium was intentionally preventing the Spren from accessing surges through Fabrials and such pre-shattering. Was this a passive or active effect? And Brandon responded, it was kind of both. The way Adonalsium worked was just that the way he saw the world was the way the world worked. He didn't want the Spren to be able to do that, so they couldn't. Pod, so did Adonalsium want to die? Brandon, non-committal noises. And it does give credibility to that theory. the idea that the way he saw the world was the way it was.
Well, that's interesting.
Footnote.
Yes.
Footnote. I don't know how to describe the face. It definitely wasn't confirmation, but it looked incriminating to me. So these two obviously go together.
Yeah. They do.
So, like, this is a very fascinating WoB because we know perception matters in the Cosmere. It's like how you view the magic affects how the magic works for you. Yep. When you are essentially God, your perception affects everything.
Huh.
So my kind of key takeaway from both of these was, if you are a shard, the things that you can do and the things that other beings can do using your own power are defined and limited by what your power is, which in turn is defined and limited to by what you think your power is. Now, what you think your power is might be an absolute truth in the sense that, well, if you're preservation, then even if you think your power can ruin, it probably can't. But if you are kind of limiting your own power in some way, if you are preservation and you're thinking that your power can only preserve instead of create, which is an incorrect example. We know that preservation can't create. But if you're in that example, then in theory, people who are using your power can do more, but like you're pushing them down because you don't think your power can do that. And so I think this translates to Adonalsium directly in this thing. Because Adonalsium didn't believe that Spren can be used in machinery to create fabrials, to access the surges. I don't even know if there were surges.
Well, that's another good question.
Yeah. Per se, at that point. If you didn't think those things were possible, then it's not necessarily that you are stopping the Spren from doing this. It's just that you don't think that's how the world works, and that is not how the world works.
This reminds me of something we've talked about before, which is that before honor splintering, singers could not become a radiance. And we talked about why before. This makes me wonder, is it just that honor didn't believe it was possible? So it couldn't happen?
That's a really good point.
Oh.
Yeah. It's nice when things click together, isn't it?
This is a much better thing than what we had before. Where we're just like, we're talking about avatars, we don't know what's going on. Whereas like this is like, I think we're sort of kind of understanding something.
Galaxy brain going on here.
Galaxy brain.
But what I find interesting about the question and or like the thing in general is that modern fabrials, at least, they work by luring a Spren and then trapping it, and then sort of abusing it for the effect. Would you still have been able to do that under Adonalsium? Like you would have been able to lure it in and trap it, but it just wouldn't have had an effect, or you couldn't do it at all. Like because we know Spren were there and they presumably already came into the physical sometimes, but like
that's a very interesting question, because without looking at Brandon's answer here, I would have said this would have definitely been possible, but there would have been far fewer Spren.
Yep.
And so the things you could accomplish would have been far fewer. And two, because the Spren back then were quote unquote Adonalsium Spren.
Sure.
They would have been far less specialized, far more generalized in what they are of and what they do and what they can do. And so I would have assumed that if pre-shattering fabrials were possible, then they would have been able to like do anything. You have the power of creation at your disposal, right? As opposed to the power of honor or the power of cultivation, which is manifested by like through the 10 surges.
Sure. Okay.
With Brandon's answer in this, I mean, obviously, I have to lean towards you just couldn't have done that. Like maybe you could trap a spren, but it just like the spren itself wouldn't be able to manifest these effects.
I think you have to be able to trap a spren because that's how singers' forms function. You lure the spren in with your, like, you have the right emotion and the spren enters your gem heart.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Fair.
Although we're getting into the weeds, where we're like, well, how did the singers look before honor and cultivation and things like that? It's like, well, how did that work? How did forms work when Adenalcium existed? And
see, if we had only stayed on the rails, we would have never gone into the weeds.
We started on the weeds. We started on the weeds. So that is so interesting. I really like the idea that honor didn't allow radiance because he didn't perceive that they could happen.
Mm-hmm. And so they couldn't.
I
know there are some people in the fandom that really do not like the idea that perception affects things, but
we know it does.
But it does.
And connecting it to shards helps me like that more, you know?
And it also does tie into like the shards' limitations based on their intent. It's like that their intent is affecting their perception.
Well, not only that, but also the fact that shards were once Mordor and they belonged to Mordor races. And so, like, in some distant way, and like a very fundamental way, I wonder if Tanavast was, I don't want to say racist, but he was
you're gonna
human.
say that.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say that.
He's
and then
pro-human.
Well, he was human to begin with, and so it's very possible that his entire understanding of the universe is human-centric. It's not that he dislikes or disrespects or whatever the singers, it's just that to him they are a foreign species.
I think that's very interesting as well.
Yeah. And it's like the fact that they were once mortal is going to like affect their perception in a way that likely didn't matter to Adenalcium.
Right. Presumably.
That everything is going to be filtered to the fact that they were once mortal. And so like even though they have these fantastical powers now, they don't think they can go as far as they probably could. They're unintentionally limiting themselves because the human mind was not designed to do what it is doing.
Yep.
And by extension, they're also limiting others who access their powers.
Yeah. I'm really digging this. This is sweet.
Cool.
The question asks, has anyone, shard or otherwise, tried to leave the Cosmere, and will we see that on screen? And Brandon answered, so far, yes. And he thinks, yes, it's likely that we will see somebody or some shard do that on screen. Which is...
Wow.
Yeah.
Shard who wants to hide and survive. Makes sense to me.
I did not expect that answer because every time Brandon has been asked about the Cosmere and like the limits of the Cosmere, to him, like, yes, he said it's a galaxy and then a dwarf galaxy and then a star cluster, but like he's always completely ignored the fact that there is more to the universe outside of that. Like I'm writing a story about the Cosmere. We're staying in the Cosmere. This is the universe for all intents and purposes, even though it's not a full universe.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, tried to leave the Cosmere.
Yeah.
That's what I was about to say.
So that implies they probably didn't succeed.
Maybe.
And how the fact that they couldn't leave if they wanted to is very interesting. Because we know investiture is tied to location.
That's true.
Perhaps like all investiture is tied to this star cluster.
I really don't want to speculate because I don't think it will bear any fruit because I don't think Brandon will ever explore anything beyond the Cosmere.
Well, if we're going to see somebody trying to leave,
God damn it, Eric. God storming, damn it.
You're welcome. I have a question. Do we think Brandon is interpreting this question to mean Cosmere the universe or Cosmere the star cluster, where the action is occurring?
The star cluster where the action is occurring.
Yeah, I think so. Too.
Yeah, I'm also with the former.
Like,
Okay.
what
By
would
former, I mean
be
latter.
the other thing? Like, would it be the shard try to go to the beyond? Like,
I don't know. That's what I'm thinking
like,
about. Like,
that's
exactly.
the only thing
Yeah.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. If we think in metaphysical instead of physical way, then yeah, sure.
Like, what is the Cosmere? What does it mean to leave the Cosmere?
Yeah.
And
what are even questions?
And the questioner asked, tried to leave. Brandon said yes. It could mean try and succeeded. I think it failed. I think that's possible. That seems reasonable.
Yeah, I just think if they did succeed, it wouldn't just be it's likely you'll see it. It's like that would be important enough that it's like you would definitely see it.
Brandon the shard can be shifty.
Maybe the shard also thought that outside of the Cosmere was just boring and came back and like doesn't really matter.
I left. It sucked. I'm back.
There is literally nothing out there.
Yeah.
I'm so guilty for leaving. I need to come back and help fight Odium. Hiding is just not worth it. This wasn't a wise choice.
I like the idea that the shard who wants to hide and survive tried to left, but the investiture was like tied to the system or whatever it was and couldn't.
I think that is a reasonable theory.
I could see that. I don't think I can see Brandon writing that. Or like even world building that.
Well, there's two pieces, right? There's the piece of a historical piece where a shard tried to leave, and then will we see such a thing on screen? And so, like, there could be something at the end of Mistborn 4 where Harmony's like, I'm out, or something. Like, we could see something like that on screen way later, and that another shard tried to leave, failed, or whatever, right? Like, those could be two different things.
That is where the "it is yours" quote comes from, because Harmony is just so fed up with the Cosmere he leaves and like leaves it to them.
Yep.
And it does say anyone, so it doesn't have to be. It could also be like some random.
Oh shoot! It says shard or otherwise.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really important thing.
Some random world hopper walking to the edge of the Cosmere to see what's there.
The shard or otherwise means that everything that we just talked about doesn't matter at all.
I mean, I still like that idea, but it's not necessarily the only possibility.
It would be very difficult for anyone who's not a shard to try to leave.
Well, I mean, you can try.
At least
until
really space age.
You can try and be bad at it.
Yeah. Yeah, you could.
It's like Kelsier tried to leave Scadrial, but it didn't work.
I feel like they're, random Silverlight scholar who wants to map the Cosmere, gets to the edges and is like, I wonder what's even further out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure.
It's just waterfalls going down.
Yeah. It's the edge of the universe.
It's
yeah,
like
with
the Cosmere's flat.
Yeah.
Because like at a certain point, it's like you would get to like the void between galaxies and where there's nothing. And so you would be going really, really far with every step. Interesting to think about, but Brandon doesn't want to talk about it.
And like, what does it mean for the FTL and things like that? Like, oh man, my brain hurts.
Yeah. The only thing that really throws a wrench in all of this is FTL. Yeah. Because with shards, you can say, the investiture is tying them down. With the cognitive realm, you can do like some twisty thing where you always end up back in the Cosmere. But with FTL, it's just like, we're booking it.
But maybe the FTL, if they're using allomancy in some way, it's tied to the investiture, so it still can't leave or some crap.
I mean,
because maybe you draw
from preservation.
Maybe that's the end of the Cosmere. Last scene, it's like a group using FTL to just like ride off into the sunset and leave the whole Cosmere behind.
And
Let's do
then
some
their
more questions.
ship breaks up and apart because it's too far from preservation. Easy. It's like, it doesn't work. Rip. And then they all die. And then it's just the end. It's the end of the Cosmere.
Roll credits.
I was trying to leave it on a positive note, but okay.
No.
Nope.
See, I was gonna say that in the spiritual realm, it doesn't matter like where and when you are, but once you leave the Cosmere, is the spiritual realm even a thing?
Well, that's exactly the thing, right? Like the physical planets, where the planets are located, is different from what the Cosmere is, because the spiritual realm's all locations.
Yeah, like, but is it all locations or
Or all Cosmere locations?
or all Cosmere locations?
Maybe this WoB just refers to a fourth wall break where Hoyd tries to climb out of the pages.
Yeah, it's like somebody is having this conversation in Cosmere, and no, it's just like, nope, I'm out.
I'm out.
And, hops through the page.
Odium's dead. I'm
I'm
out. I'm
Hoyd,
writing
Hoyd.
I'm writing Dragonsteel. It just says bye Hoyd.
Hoyd world hops into the Reckonverse.
Oh no. Next question, and I think this will be our last question for this episode. I think what we'll do is, because I actually have a bit of spare time, we don't have to do a large episode. We'll do 2 smaller episodes, and you'll get the next one next week. How nice. That sounds nice and lovely. Slowswift asks, so all of the vessels of the shards were, if not mortal, at least physical beings at some point, right? Brandon, yes. Are there any living descendants of any of them still in the Cosmere? Brandon, yes.
Sweet.
Hot take. Do we think a descendant of a shard
Is an
would
avatar.
be better for becoming an avatar? Would they be more compatible?
Well, I mean,
I
if
mean-
you're making a being, would you call that a descendant?
I don't know. I wouldn't. I don't know if
What is it?
compatibility is a factor in avatars.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Let's interpret this to be that presumably some vessels
Mhm.
had children. I think that's probably a safe bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that the descendants of those kids could still be alive. Because
Yes.
with that's probably the narrow, reasonable reading for this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It
And they're hanging
certainly
out with
makes
the Lord Ruler's kids.
Yeah. Easy. Yeah. Well, the
They're
Lord
not
Ruler's
important.
All the neglected kids in the
Oh,
Cosmere.
yeah. Lutha is just another shard vessel. It makes sense.
And they then meet up with the dead dads from the non-Cosmere stories.
Right, from non-Cosmere dead dads and Cosmere
And then
dead
they try and
moms.
leave the Cosmere.
And they have happy families together.
Yeah.
And
That's-
all of them are unnamed.
the Beyond is just a dating platform for them. Yeah.
Oh,
I like
it. I imagine I think these kids are probably on Yolen, right? I don't know where.
That seems reasonable if
Yeah.
Yolen is not destroyed. Yeah.
Well, at least were.
True.
It- Yeah.
We know that world hopping was not very common pre-shattering,
Yeah.
but it was possible.
Maybe after
And
shattering.
post-shattering, like immediately after shattering, it could have been something like Honor and Cultivation could have had kids, and like they could have lifted those kids with them to Roshar if they
Yeah.
wanted to, for example, or Ashen, I guess.
I was
Okay, kids, we're
imagining-
going on a road trip. We're gods now. Come with us.
Coming
Better
with.
than what I was imagining, like a kid coming home being like, "Where did mommy and daddy go?"
I made you a
Just
new
never
world, a
seen
better world.
And
One I
of them
like
is-
more.
And one of them is an edgy teenager, and he tried to leave the Cosmere. Like, he didn't his parents had, like,
Honor and Cultivation moved to Roshar to get away from their kids.
I like to imagine that there are a few shards on Yolen that never left, maybe.
Mhm.
I don't have any evidence to base that other than that we still have a lot of shards that we haven't seen yet. So,
No.
don't know when we're
I
going
think
to
it's-
get books about them.
I think it's reasonable to assume that at least one stayed. Like, it seems hard to believe. It seems to me hard to believe that all of them just did their business on Yolen and just like,
Unless
all
the
of them
planet
left.
broke or something. I don't know. But
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Chris
but-
knows of it. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
now I just want to see one of Edgley's descendants trying to go through Nalthis customs and just like, my great grandmother is the goddess here. You should just
She runs this place.
Yeah.
Downland's like, who are you?
Spoiled rich kid, just like, yo.
Yeah,
No,
man.
Mom, I'm leaving out. I'm
The
moving
Nathian
out.
custom agents are ruthless. Ruthless. So, friends, we hope you enjoyed this episode of getting way too deep in the weeds. And oh my goodness, we got through 5 pages of these. So that's great news. So let's quickly do Who's That Cosmere Character. Our next episode will be 1 week from the posting of this one. Not 2 weeks, so don't you worry. Because I don't want to edit a giant 3-hour podcast. So we'll do 2 shorter ones. Easy.
This character is from Roshar.
Menace.
Tien.
Tom.
Braze.
Void in drag on a horse.
It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character? Caw.
This first one was sent in by Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Hello.
If you are
Hi.
the Brian with whom I went to college with, and he was my best friend in college,
Welcome.
welcome. I'm now famous in this tiny community.
All right. Clue 1. This character interacts with animals.
Is it Tongfa?
Yes, it is.
Oh, whoa!
Wow.
Marvin's just like, yo,
Very
I
nice.
knew I've been waiting so long to play this game, and I'm here to just nail it.
I usually get them I don't get them, but this one, like...
I was
these
thinking
animals.
about the Rosharan stable master who with
Janala?
horse. Yeah, Janala. Yeah, but I couldn't
no,
remember.
No, it's not Janala.
Jeanette.
It's
Jeanette.
Janet.
Yeah.
Bennett.
Oh, excellent. Well, Tongfa was one of Dent's crew in Warbreaker. Nice.
Yeah, the other clues were this character is involved in a rebellion.
Oh, okay.
This
Well, that narrows it down a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. This character is not from Roshar. This character is a sociopath. And Brandon describes this character as a waste of flesh.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
Brandon does say that. Yeah.
It is true, yeah.
Yep. Nice.
Good.
It's like the meanest thing Brennan has ever said about anyone.
Yeah, but they're fictional characters he wrote, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nice.
you haven't seen him talk about me on signings.
Warning, Evgeni. Oh, they let you in here. All right, Grace.
This one was sent in by Colton X9.
Oh, hey,
Oh.
Colton.
Been a while.
Hey,
Hello. Welcome.
Another person who's been on this show once,
Yes.
because we don't know jack about magic.
Oh, yes, Magic the Gathering. Not, Magic
No,
in general.
the other magic we know like as much as is possible to know.
Yeah.
Clue 1. This character is male.
Demid.
It is not Demid.
Denth.
It is not Denth.
You guys gotta guess D names.
You're required to. by law.
Dalinar.
It is not Dalinar.
Dobson.
It is not Doxon.
Yay.
Clue 2. This character can use an invested art.
Wouldn't it be crazy if the next clue was this character's name starts with a D? Wouldn't that be the most crazy thing ever?
I have one more character where I also can show off bad pronunciation, Demo.
It is not
No, that's
Demo.
good.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to start with a D at all. No way.
God, everyone wants the D.
Yeah.
Um,
Like now I'm trying to think of one that starts with a D.
Kelsier.
It is not Kelsier.
Okay, you ruined it, so now I can guess Raoden, who
It is
I
not Raiden.
I wanted to guess Doxon, but he doesn't have.
Mm.
And
Think
he,
so.
he
And
was just guessed.
guessed.
and
Yeah.
Marvin already guessed him.
Oh, did it?
Last round, yeah.
Oh, last round. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've been deep in the weeds.
Yes, you have. We all have. What's your excuse?
Can use an invested art is the
Mhm.
thing. Marsh.
It is not Marsh. Clue 3. This character is employed by the government.
Is it town?
It is not
Like,
that person.
Okay. A town, like yeah.
Oh,
She's hardly
Wait.
employed.
Who are you referring to?
Sorry, I messed up the name.
What are you thinking, Tane?
No, another
Okay,
herald.
Okay.
But yeah,
Oh, I see. Yeoman?
it is not Yeoman.
The blood sealer known as Weed Finger.
It is a weed finger.
Whoa!
I figured you know for the weeds. We do weed fingers.
Nice.
Nice.
Clue 4 is this character is in a long distance relationship. Clue 5, this
Oh, the
character is
dream.
from Cell.
Nice. Very nice.
by the way, I have another one with D that would fit as these the first two clues. Dryle, for instance.
Yeah.
Objection, Your Honor. Do we know that he's in a long distance relationship, or do we know if that girl is his sister? Because he sends letters.
I thought they
To
were
a
romantic
person-
in nature.
Yeah, I'm very I thought the implication was definitely that they were a relationship.
It's
Well-
heavily implied, at the very least.
The comment
Well-
says he had a lover, but that might also be just implied there. But yeah,
No,
it could. Well, yeah, we don't know the. I don't want to pronounce the name.
Regardless, I got it before that
Yeah.
point. So
Okay. I do not retract my objection because there's no citation on the lover
Yeah.
thing.
yeah.
Because in my head, it's always been that the person he's emailing is his sister.
Yeah. We also don't know Sumerian customs as far as incest is concerned.
They subscribe to the Lannister school of thought.
Great. Well, great, guys. Thanks for coming to this episode. You can follow us on 17chart.com for all your news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever want. You can join us on Discord and chat us up. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, YouTube. You can support us on Patreon. You can leave us a review on iTunes. And we will see you all next week.
bye.
Rock on.
Bye.
Bye.